Let's get to our first conversation today. A businessman and former senior advisor to the President of the United States, Elon Musk, has drawn fresh attention to shifting global economic dynamics following Nigeria's strong showing in International Monetary Fund's 2026 growth projections. In its latest outlook, the IMF ranked Nigeria sixth among the world's top 10 contributors to global real GDP growth in 2026, with a projected contribution of 1.5%. Reacting to this projection, Mr. Musk noted that the balance of power is changing, highlighting a broader shift towards emerging markets as key drivers of global growth. Indeed, while advanced economies are expected to grow by just 1.8%, emerging markets are forecast to grow at about 4.2%, signaling a gradual but significant rebalancing of global economic momentum beyond the West. Let's unpack this and look at what it means for Nigeria and other emerging economies, especially amidst the ongoing domestic challenges, of course, structural and domestic challenges that we face. I'm being joined by an enterprise ambassador, renowned development economist, chief strategist at ECOWAS, development economist, as he loves to be called, Professor Ken Ife. He joins me live from Abuja to have this conversation. Prof, it's good to have you in. Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for your time. Thank you, Prof.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yes, Prof, I am excited that the likes of Elon Musk is talking about Nigeria's economy. But let me first of all start this conversation this way. President Bola Tinubu yesterday hosted a delegation from the World Bank and, of course, commendations coming with regards to the reforms in Nigeria. Now that we see these commendations coming from most of the international parties, and what we've seen with the figures, the GDP, not Nigeria being sixth on that list, where does it place us as a country? Where are we? Does it mean that we have really turned that curve as expected?
Well, what I would say is that we can see light in the end of the tunnel. I'm not quite sure I could use the exact word you used I wouldn't use the word, but I can say that we have seen light. We are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And why do I say that? Remember, there are two perspectives to our economy. There is growth when you are on the fast lane, and then there is also a slow lane where you have to, address poverty reduction issues and all kinds of unemployment and all of that. So the real test is how do you balance those? So at the macroeconomic level, not the micro, at the macroeconomic level, Nigeria has ticked most of the boxes, without a doubt. And that is the fiscal side of things, part of the fiscal, but a lot of the monetary. We've got the exchange rate, right? We've got control over that, it's stable. We've also got our reserves going up. We have all the indicators are showing positive and positive. And then the growth figures are not disappointing, 3.8. By the time we do the annualize it, it may come around 4, which is good news. But the thing is, people are still on the other side of the fence saying, how does it translate to poverty reduction? How does it create employment? Because we're losing jobs. And then they look at a stronger look at the economy. When you look at our economy is still essentially import dependent. When you are import dependent economy, you are exporting raw materials and exporting your jobs. And what do you import? You are importing poverty into the country. And that's the dichotomy that is, people don't seem to understand why we should be posting growth and then we are worsening in unemployment and poverty. So that's the challenge. But in terms of the good news from Elon Musk is I needed to clarify something. There is a difference between nominal GDP and real GDP. Now, nominal GDP, as you would know, is just that measurement. But when you want to do real GDP, you have to now, in the case of Nigeria, and as many other countries, you have to now take into account the inflation and the depreciation of our naira. So while the nominal GDP is 19.229%, the actual real GDP, when you take all those into account, comes to 3.98. If you look at India, their nominal GDP is 8%, but the real GDP is 7.4%. US is a different case. and then you have Saudi Arabia 8%, 8.4, but their real GDP is 4.2, 4.5. None of these numbers correlate with the number we are having as a growth driver, because the numbers you are having here, they're not even adding up to 100%. What is happening is that when you want to look at the contribution, not the absolute growth rate, it is the contribution to global economy. Now you look at all the countries that have shown growth. Then from those, the top ones, the ones that actually reflect, are the ones that have heavy population. So when China has 5% growth rate, and then their population is 1.4 billion, and then India has 7.4% real growth, and their population is 1.3. So that will, if you multiply that, that will become a bigger mass. Whereas the small countries that may have 8% growth rate, like people like Kenya or Ethiopia, that may have 7%, but their population is so small that when you multiply that, it disappears. It's 0.000. You won't find that zero anymore. And that's why Germany is also 0.9. It's the population factor that is used in compounding that. It's just like, a contribution. That's how you work out contribution. So in all probability, you will now see China ranking higher than India, US. US is even less than 10%. And China and India alone are 43.6%, accounting for 43.6%. And whereas if you look at the Asian economies themselves, they account for about over 50%. Those just the economies. Those are the ones that are within the 10, not more. If you go down further, you will see the number will increase. So this is the context in which Nigeria appeared there, because of our 230 million population, multiplied by whatever our rate was, 3.8%, 3.89. So that is how we entered into that fray. But that is not to diminish the fact that Nigeria is posting growth. And according to the World Bank report and what the discussion with the president, they are just showing that Nigeria has become a point of reference in major global discussions about fiscal and monetary policy and macroeconomic growth. They are now looking at Nigeria as a beacon of hope to say, if you religiously carry out certain measures and reform, and then you keep to it, you generate confidence in the investor community. And then as long as you are maintaining it, because what investors want, I keep saying that it is not the absolute rate of exchange that matters to them, it's the stability that matters to them, policy consistency, fiscal monetary handshake, so that one is not fighting the other. This is our fiscal dominance over monetary policy. It has to cool down a bit. So that's what they are looking at. And then, so you notice that in the first two and a half years, they just weren't coming. The FDA weren't coming. But now that they are seeing confidence, they are seeing steady hands, they are seeing macroeconomic stability, they look at the kind of figures they are mentioning, $20 billion from Shell, $5 billion here, UAE looking at $10 billion. So big money will come, without a doubt.
Great stuff. I'm excited, at least, a bit of good news again from that end. But you talked about something very important, Prof, which is addressing the level of poverty, the fallout of these reforms. We've been talking about this for so long, talking about some will say social safety net, some will say government needs to do this, do that. At this point that we've gotten to in this policy reforms, government also said it, President said it yesterday, that he's not going back. But what do you think should be those wins for the macros now, the micros, I beg your pardon? So, because they need to start to feel the impact. Some will give you examples. Bag of rice. How much was a bag of rice a year ago? How much is a bag of rice at this moment? But, let's look at price of fuel. We saw a bit of reduction. Now again, it's back to above 800 naira and all of that. So, but what are those quick wins? What do you think we need to do?
The price you didn't mention is cassava. I'm involved in cassava. We're doing about 3,000 hectares. Listen to me, less than a year ago, I was selling 50 kg bag of gari, 60,000 naira. In December, I sold 20,000 naira.
Wow. See?
I was buying and selling 1 ton of raw cassava, 130 to 150,000. But last December, November, I was buying at 60,000. So yeah, there's an area where we have forced the price down. So we have suffered, but it shows that something can happen. Now, let me tell you one thing. A law has been put on the table of the president, signed by both, an act, bill, signed by both Senate and House of Rep on 30% mandatory value addition on our raw materials. Now, if you are sending, I want to explain to you, please. If you export raw material, the maximum you can earn is 10%, not more than 15% of the value of that value chain. And then you sell those raw material, export your jobs, importing poverty with your import, and then you go and borrow 100% to buy the finished product. You are going to be borrowing to buy finished product. You will develop as an economy. Now, the thing is this, the people that make money are the people who sit in the middle to add value. So when you selling, if you add 10% value on your product before you export it, you get another 10% in the revenue. If you add 30% value, you get over 30% of the value of that value chain. That is the simple arithmetic. And when you are doing that, you are creating jobs at home. Your MSMEs don't need any palliative. They just let them have that law and they can start adding value. And then I'll tell you the greatest challenge. If you don't have a when they are freely exporting the raw material, when you tell them you have a floor guaranteed by law of 30%, then they can come and then hope that they can get the raw material and then produce for Africa. So this is, we are shooting ourselves in the foot by not dealing with that. So the president has to approve that into law so that we can begin, even the crude, you don't even need to export that crude under that act. You can export the ones on the high sea, but the ones inland, they are not going to be enough. If Dangote goes to 1.2 million barrels a day, and then BUA is doing 200,000 barrels for 50 billion in Ondo, is going to do no less than 500,000 barrels, your 3 million barrels is gone. Your projected is gone. So we better face that fact that Dangote has de-risked refining sovereignty for Nigeria, and they also built a resilient infrastructure for distribution, storage, and of fuel. So now people are coming in. Let us have Nigeria as a refining sovereignty, and then export the whole. Look at Africa consuming over 24. They spend 120 billion a year, and then 20 billion alone on PMS Africa. So the market is there for Nigeria to take. Only 2 refineries are working in Africa, South Africa and Nigeria. So why wouldn't we take this market? All you are having is the shenanigan of NNPC importing, losing all the dollars that they get from crude to import when they haven't got the refinery that is working. We have to do better things. I was celebrating when NNPC was getting a promise that they are going to have 20 billion from share. I said, this is the message we want to hear, because this is real Nigeria talking with our monopolist. I'm sorry. So we could do better. The question is that we could do better.
Now, finally, almost finally, Prof. Now, let me say almost finally. We saw FAC distributions a few days ago, and about 1.9 trillion naira again was shared. I think at the end of the day, about 1.6 or 7 was shared among the 3 tiers of government. But my question really would be, we've seen improved revenue with regards to Federal Accounts Allocation Committee, states getting so much, federal government, state governments, and local governments getting so much of funds, thanks to subsidy removal and, of course, all of the means government is trying to use to save funds and all. But are you, in your assessment, do you think that these state governments, local governments are doing enough to support the federal government in actualizing all of the positives of these reforms?
Well, I'm sure they could do more. But I think what the government, the president has tried to secure Supreme Court judgment on the local authorities. Let him just implement it. He's talked about executive order, issued executive order. You've given the governors a long rope, and if they are not prepared to play ball, issue the executive order and let this 700, is it 900 and some 708 something? Let them all have their money, and we can now draw the satellite. Will go to local government authorities, and what that means that we are going to now begin to demand better quality and better governance at the local level when the money is hitting their purse. So I think, and then you're going to see better quality of people coming into that politics of local government, because they are now controlling substantial amount of money, and not state government doing that. But secondly, too, I know that there are areas where the government needs to really defer to local government, to state governments to drive. For example, agriculture. Agriculture and small business support. They should defer to state governments to do that, and then encourage them to take over some of the infrastructure that are like trunk roads, and then reimburse them. But there's some more that they could do. Even dam. I don't know what federal government is doing with dams. Small dams and medium dams, they should exit so that state governments can put them into practice and use them. Even all our basins, about 12 basins, should play into the hands of the governors. But having said that too, I don't think it's fair to simply say that, oh, the money is 3 times what they used to receive. They don't forget. In 2023, exchange rate was 500 to $1. Now is 1,400 to $1. So if you can see over 200%, 250% rise, devaluation, that immediately translates to the money that they're having. Then we are getting 700 billion, multiplied by 3 is 2.1 billion, multiplied by 2.5. So it's around the money that they're still receiving. But it sounded big in our, when trillion looks a lot big, but it's part of the devaluation story.
That's really a very big one. But moving forward now in 2026, penultimate to an election, and that's been the concern of many, saying maybe attention would shift. Prof, I don't know if you're worried about that. What you think about policy sustainability in the year 2026, considering the elections ahead?
No, definitely, we all know in an election year, the politicians get very distracted.
Yes.
And so that's why we are asking President to sign some of these. There are some outstanding things that he has to deal with. And don't let it be, don't let them enter into the political calculations. Sign the bill, issue the directive on executive order on payments going straight to whichever local government that are not ready with their account. Pay for the one that are ready with their accounts. So that is the only thing. You don't wait for everybody. Pay those who have already submitted their accounts. Secondly, sign the bill on 30% so that you can unlock this economy. The economy is in trouble. If you notice that central bank is no longer funding the domestic intervention, and then interest rates are so high, if you go to money lender, they're asking for 10% a month, which is 120%. If you go to microfinance bank, they're asking for 6%, that is 72%. If you go to commercial bank, they're asking for minimum of 35%. So where would MSME, which manufacturer will borrow money at those rates? So the thing is that there are certain things that will help them. If we have more power, yes, it will help them, but we don't. And then if you can allow them, put this law in place so that we know that we must process our raw material before exporting it. And then not even 100%, we just say 30%. We've been doing this in ECOWAS for more than 20 years, but it's in Nigeria that is dragging in everything. We'll be doing it under our ETLS, for nearly 20 years. So it is not a big deal. It is something that is necessary, that will upgrade the economy, that will switch. How can you, if you see what we've suffered in cassava right now, you will see why it is difficult for people to, all the farmers would have run away if we didn't say, okay, buy all the cassava from them, and they were losing money. They were selling 130. Now you're paying them 60,000. You will never plant next year. So unless we buy up from them. So we had to buy up from them, and bear the cost of transport, everything, just to make sure they come back this year to plant. So it is the name of the game is processing. And you're going to raise that bar, that floor, for us to be taken seriously.
Indeed, we need to be taken seriously. Finally, Prof, the next MPC meeting is in, let's say, it's up to 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks time. I think it's on the 28th, around that time, I think the last week in the month of February. What are you expecting, and what do you think would shape the decision at that first meeting?
Well, although they have adjusted the inflation figure, as you saw, so it became less scandalous. so I don't know how much it will play into their decision making. But the fact of the matter is that the economy is cooling, and even if they don't drop the rates itself, the NPI rates, I would expect adjustment on the asymmetric corridor that will still produce the same effect. So, but generally, it is not about signaling, really and truly. It is about signaling. That's why many people are expecting a drop. But I think I would expect an adjustment on the asymmetric corridor to produce the same effect as dropping the rates, to encourage, to show that we're actually concerned about growth in the real sector. You see, we have growth in the service sector. We have growth in the oil because it was 19% in second quarter. It dropped to 5% in the third quarter. And then now the rest of the growth is coming from service sector, but not from the real sector. Manufacturing sector is butchered, and we need to have real growth in the real sector. So that's why it's important that the NPC take a closer look at some of the macroeconomic indicators that have been positive and convergent.
Professor Kenny Faye, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Development economist, always interesting having you join us on the show. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.